You know, your higher self isn't some faraway, perfect, elevated version of your spirit that only shows up in rare mystical moments. It is the deepest, clearest, most God connected aspect of your consciousness. It's the part of you beneath the fear, beneath the conditioning, beneath that static of the everyday mind. It's the deeper intelligence that knows what the conscious mind has forgotten. And today I'm going to talk about what the higher self is, why we lose touch with it, how intuition is one of its main languages, and how to tune ourselves back into that signal. So settle in for this one. You're definitely going to want to hear this. All right, so let's go. Let's get into it right now. Let's go. This is Earth School Radio, exploring the lessons of being human, one conscious conversation at a time. Hello, 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 all you beautiful human people on the planet. My name's Sheila Say, and I'm your host, and this is Earth School Radio, place where we just get together, talk about being human on this crazy, ever-changing, wild planet. So welcome back to Earth School Radio, and it's been a while. It's been about 2 months since I recorded a podcast, and I just took a little hiatus. I had my bestie from 40 years. We met each other when we were 13, and she came to visit me, and my older kids, my two sons, came with their families to join me. So, I just been taking a little break and enjoying my journey. So anyway, I am getting back into the swing of things, trying to figure out, if I'm connecting everything right, and trying not to overthink it, which is basically what I do in this lifetime. But anyway, just a little quick life update before we dive in. I am coming to the end of my RV journey. In about 2 weeks, I'm going to be heading back home to Cincinnati, and that feels like a really big, threshold moment, like what's getting ready to happen. I feel all this expectant energy, even though I don't really know what my plans are. Just want to get home, get moved back into the house, and get my kids going to regular school. So, yeah, this chapter has been absolutely beautiful. It's been stretching and chaotic and expansive. It'll humble you, but it's also been so freaking inspiring, and just a really wonderful healing time. Being on the road like this, though, will really show you a little something about yourself. It strips away everything, and it puts you face to face with your patterns and your relationships and your nervous system, your fears, and sometimes even, like plumbing and toe dollies and all that stuff. Earth School is definitely thorough. But I'm preparing to go home, and I feel that, familiar transition energy. And, I always want to know what's coming, but this time I feel like, I'm in this time of my life where I'm connected into this deeper part that's telling me just to listen and get quiet and just pay attention, that I'm being guided and not to stress out. You got this. And that is what today's episode's all about. And that's why it feels so alive for me, because it's kind of like I feel like I'm being led by, this higher power, this higher, my higher self. So let's talk about it. Let's get really down and dirty with the higher self. What is it? Who's talked about this concept? When does it show up? How do we notice it? Why do we lose connection to it? Why do we need it? And then, finally, how do we access it in a really grounded, centered way? And I want to draw in intuition into the conversation. I've talked about it a lot on the podcast. Your intuition is really the main language of your higher self. It's not the only language, but it is definitely, in my opinion, the clearest, one of the clearest. All right, so let's get into it. So what is the higher self? The simplest definition that I can give is the higher self is the deepest, clearest, most expanded, and God connected aspect of your consciousness. It's the part of you that sees beneath fear, beneath your conditioning, survival, the roles that you play. Beyond the story that you've been telling yourself about who you are, it's not your ego. It's not this personality. It's not Sheila. It's not my mood. Um, it's not that part of me that panics or, anything like that. It is this expanded, higher part underneath all of that. It is the you beneath the static. I think of it kind of like the part of us that's directly connected to the source, to the field, to God, whatever language you use for, the divine intelligence that holds all of life. I think of the higher self as the soul, the God self, but the name of it really isn't the point. The point is the experience. Our higher self feels like clarity. It feels like when you're texting somebody and you're trying to give them support, they're going through something, and you're really just trying to, give them love and kindness and compassion, and you're focusing from that point, and you send a text and they text you back immediately, and they're like, oh my God, how did you know that that's what I was going through? Or, man, what you said just really hit me and I really appreciate it. And you reread it and you're like, damn, that's really insightful. How did I come up with that? And it's those moments. It's when you feel like you're drawing from something that doesn't necessarily come from your conscious mind. Um, say you've had an argument with somebody and you walk away and you're kind of in your feels and you're, rehearsing it in your head, and you're wanting to just go through it and justify and, maybe think of something that you should have said just to really stick it to them, and then instead, all of a sudden you start getting this, inside voice kind of giving you this alternative perspective, kind of saying to you, you really were kind of an ass. You know, he, he's been working his butt off, or I'm not saying who I was fighting with, but, you know, you'll get this higher self that comes in and just takes all of that anger and frustration, and it just kind of gives you this aligned, emotional impression. Um, your higher self wants you to become who you came here to be. It's very invested in your success. And it's come from many cultures, many traditions, many religious, um, affiliations talk about this concept of a higher self. It's this, the words don't really matter. It's this concept of a surface identity and then having also this deeper, wiser access point where the connection to everything, to God, to the all there is, exists. Carl Jung, the psychologist, he talked about the self as something deeper than the ego. Remember, your ego is the part of you that identifies with this body. I'm Sheila. I'm a nurse. Here's my story. Here's my personality. Here's my wounds. But Jung said that the self is bigger than all of that. It's the deeper center within us, the divine spark, the part trying to bring all of those scattered pieces of who we are back into a state of like wholeness. And that word is incredible, wholeness. It's really what the higher self is all about. The higher self isn't about us being perfect, because perfect is exhausting. Perfect doesn't exist. Perfect is fake. This earth experience is all about duality. It's all about, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the higher self is there to draw us toward wholeness. And this idea shows up in a lot of traditions. In the Hindu philosophy, there's the word Atman. It's the eternal self. In in Theosophy, there writers like Helena Blavatsky talked about a higher spiritual nature in us that's like a bridge between human beings and the divine. And then, of course, Christianity, there's, the concept of the higher self is the idea of the Holy Spirit or the Christ within or the kingdom within. There's something deeper in us than the everyday self, and many, many places have pointed to that very same thing. Something that remembers everything about who we are, past, present, and future. And, I know I've mentioned Dolores Cannon in some of my earlier episodes, but I do want to include her work here too. God, it's so funny how I just always find a way to talk about Dolores Cannon. But she talked about in her QHHT sessions, quantum healing hypnosis therapy, she used the term SC or the subconscious. But it wasn't like necessarily the subconscious mind the way psychology usually sees the word. She called it the SC, and she described it as the all-knowing part of the person, the part connected directly to source that understands that specific soul's journey. It's the part that can access information that the conscious mind does not have access to. And it's so crazy. In her sessions, people would sometimes receive information about their patterns of behavior, where their fears came from. When she would connect with that person's subconscious, she could ask questions. And a lot of times they would give her the questions ahead of time and say, when you're able to connect, ask my subconscious this. Why am I suffering with diabetes? Why do I have this illness? Why have I suffered this trauma? And while in those states where the client's SC was being accessed, Dolores would ask if it was appropriate if the SC could heal their illnesses or their diseases. And it would. As long as in the session, the deeper cause of the illness was, then understood by the client, it would go in and it would heal them right there on the table. And then, the clients would leave, they'd go to their doctor, and, a couple months later, they'd be completely in remission or no longer have Hashimoto's or whatever it is they were struggling with. So it just goes to show you there's really no right way to think of it. What matters more is this central idea that your ordinary thinking mind is not the whole of who we are. It's the deeper intelligence that's available to us. And I always think of the movie, I don't know if you've seen the movie Interstellar, but there's a visual that always comes up for me when I'm thinking of kind of my higher self and how it tries to guide me. And I don't know. So I hope you will relate to it. But anyway, I wanted to talk about it. So the father, there's this astronaut. He's a retired astronaut played by Matthew McConaughey. And he's got this daughter and a son. And he lives on Earth. But Earth is suffering. And it's going to, we're not going to be able to live on it. So they recruit him to go back into space to find a planet that we can all survive on and save humanity. So he goes. And while he's up there, time doesn't exist the same in space as it does on Earth. And so he found himself in this different dimensional space, let's say. And he was trying so desperately to contact his daughter on Earth. And he was in this sort of anomalous dimensional place where he could see her and interact with things in that space on an energetic level, but she couldn't see him there, and he couldn't talk to her or anything like that. So he had to leave little breadcrumbs basically. And he was trying, to communicate with her. Her name was Murph. And she would get the clues. That was coordinates on the floor written in the dust that blew in the window, or the book that got knocked off the shelf. And, you see him trying to send this information and getting so discouraged. And then you finally, through the movie, you end up seeing that she's starting to put the signs together and, through the environment and through what she can notice from where she's at. That image has always stayed with me. It's not because I think that that's exactly how our higher self is, but it really does kind of fit the emotional tone. There's this loving intelligence that just wants the best for us, that wants us to be on our aligned path. And it's actively guiding us, you know? The human self is here on earth in the body, paying the bills, figuring out all the shit, being confused and not knowing. That's the hardest thing, but we have this access. You don't have to not know. The higher self is not separate from us. Okay? It has a wider view. It can see more of our pattern. It can see what the human self can't from inside their moment. And it loves us. That's important. It's not some, superior version of you rolling its eyes because you're struggling again. It is not judging you. It's not disgusted with your humanity. It's not saying, oh my God, she just keeps making everything so hard. It loves us just like a parent loves their child. It's this benevolence. It wants us to succeed, not just in the worldly sense of achievement and, money or status. It wants us to succeed in those ways too. But the first way that wants us to succeed is to find our true north, the place where we become more whole, more awake, more loving, where we feel alive. Our higher self is all about our healing, and it wants us to remember who we are and stop abandoning ourselves. It wants us to follow that aligned path. And it usually communicates through signals, not force. Okay, it's never going to be dramatic. It's usually very subtle. And that's where intuition and dreams and synchronicities. It can communicate through your creativity, whatever you do, gardening, painting, singing, writing, whatever you do. It will work through that, through a lyric or through color or whatever. You'll notice repeated themes or a phrase or something that keeps coming back. Somebody who says exactly what you needed to hear. And then, that's why we have to be observant, because we have to notice all these things. We have to find the breadcrumbs, the Easter eggs that are sitting around waiting for us. That's why we have to learn the frequency of our higher self. What is our frequency? If we, our frequency is our broadband signature. If we're flooded with fear and, panic and constant movement and never being settled and our nervous system's a mess and we're resentful and exhausted and there's constant noise, the signal's not going to get through. It's going to get buried. The higher self is still there, but we are not tuned clearly enough to receive it. The human body is a radio. Really. We are always broadcasting and we are always receiving. The higher self is one of the clearest signals available to us, but we have to be able to tune the dial to the right channel. And, life just keeps lifing and these circumstances get involved, and that's what changes the channel. You're not doing anything wrong. You're living life, and when things get going and you're not staying, grounded and you're participating in the world, your channel gets changed to the I'm stressing about bills channel, or the I'm just going to stress myself out to the point where I'm exhausted and resentful of everybody in my house channel. And, and then you have to figure out how to get yourself back into that frequency to pick up that communication. It's always on the dial. It's always present, but most of us don't live from it automatically because, the station keeps getting hijacked. We lose connection because the ego gets loud. And the thing is that, our ego isn't evil. The ego helps us function in the physical world. It gives us a sense of identity. It helps us make choices, keep boundaries, remember our name, keep us from walking into the middle of traffic. The ego has a job, but the problem is we mistake sometimes the ego for our whole self, this identity, our problems, our wounds. We think that that's who we are. But when we realize and we pull ourselves out of that and, realize that that's all built from our experiences and our memories and, the family systems and the survival strategies and the religious conditioning and what school we went to and whether we got praise or rejected and, all of it. That's what our ego is. That's not higher self territory. The ego says, this is who I am, but the higher self is like, yeah, that's who you have learned to be, but let's go deeper. The ego is ready for control, but the higher self is like, let's just be, smooth sailing. Let's just work through wisdom. The ego, always is real reactive. And the higher self is like, let's pause, let's contemplate, let's just see what comes up. So, yeah, the higher self knows that, transformation is necessary for our growth. And the ego wants that, certainty of knowing what's going to happen. But the higher self is like, I'm just going to give you this feeling of alignment to guide your next step. And, this constant struggle between ego and higher self is why sometimes the inner work can feel really uncomfortable. The higher self is always like guiding us toward growth, and growth usually threatens the parts of us that just are comfortable and want to just stay in the familiar. And why a truly aligned step can still feel scary. It's not scary because you're doing something wrong. It's not the right thing to do. It just means that you're leaving the old way of being, and that was what you're used to. That's scary when you're only tapped into your ego self. I did a video on why it's so hard to change. And it talks about all of the ways that we, have programmed ourselves, that we'd rather accept mediocre or crappy circumstances just because we know what they are than change something that could really be amazing for us. And so there's a bunch of different ways that we can be taken away from that channel, from that connection. The constant noise, the constant input, just our lives. When the mind is racing, we lose connection through our unprocessed emotions. Shit you don't acknowledge. You pushed it away. Grief, anger, fear, shame or resentment. Old trauma can create static on your dial and your frequency gets muddled again. So it's all of these things. And, it's very intentional. If you want to have this relationship with this, there's like Chat GPT where you can, have access to so many answers, but you have your own internal Chat GPT. It's your higher self, and you have all of the answers already within you. If you can learn to tap into it, this freaking gnat is going to lose its life. Okay. Anyway, we lose our connection when we outsource our knowing, to everyone else, to our experts, to our therapist, or, to the people on TikTok, to our friends or our family. And all of those things are great. They can offer wisdom, but none of them can replace our own inner discernment. The higher self isn't lost. It just gets pushed out by the human experience. And you just have to remember how to hear it. So, how does it show up for us? Well, it shows up in our ordinary life more than we realize, as intuition, that quiet knowing. The other night, perfect example, I was going to go to the beach. My son had left. I'd been here another week and I had a really bad sunburn, so I really didn't go out for several days. And the other night I was like, I'm going to go down to Clearwater. It's beautiful there. Had a great spot. I was thinking of parking by the, hotel right where the activities are all at. So anyway, I got ready and then all of a sudden I was just kind of like, I don't want to go down there. I just don't feel like it. I started thinking about the parking lot and having to pay for parking, and it might have been crowded. So I was just kind of like over it. And I said, I'm just not going to go. Next day I got up, started looking on my phone for something, and I saw that there was this police everywhere exactly in the parking lot that I was going to go park at. And it was like some sort of mob of teenagers that just randomly started like beating people up. Like, what is wrong with people? So anyway, if I had gone down there, that's exactly where I would have been. But my intuition was like, you just don't want to go tonight. So you have to really start to listen to your body, to your feelings. It's just a feeling sometimes, you know? Um, that's just the way it was. And I was like, thank you, Spirit. And sometimes you'll get dreams or messages or symbols or, you know, songs will come up. You'll have this profound feeling that when you wake up from a dream, like, man, that really meant something. I am going to kill this gnat. Okay. It shows up all the time in synchronicities throughout your day. Like you have, you know, like you've been trying to figure out if you want to. This motherfucker.
We now return to our regularly scheduled programming.
It shows up all the time in synchronicities throughout your entire day. Like you have been trying to figure out if you want to, I don't know, take a job in Albuquerque and you're in the car and Albuquerque randomly, you know, shows up in a song, or you're in the mall and you see somebody walk by with a t-shirt that says Albuquerque, you know, or whatever, you know, just you start seeing those things. A book somebody mentions casually and, you know, you see it the next day at a yard sale. And then you see it again on somebody's Facebook post. It's that thing that keeps landing in your awareness until you finally say, okay, I'm listening. You know, it'll show up in creativity. That's a big one for me. My higher self is all about the creativity, you know. The higher self speaks through what wants to come through you. A painting, a song, a podcast idea, a sudden vision or a phrase that seems like it just came from somewhere deeper than your thinking mind. You know, sometimes you're going to get really connected in nature. That's one of the big ones for me. You know, a lot of people hear themselves better outside because nature quiets, you know, everything. You don't have to have all the masks on in, you know, the trees don't ask you to perform, and, you know, the sun doesn't care if you're caught up on all your to-do list. And, you know, the higher self also shows up when life really breaks open, when you lose your grip on shit. The ego reaches its limits and this deeper intelligence starts to rise. And it's why some people awaken to their connection when they're really experiencing like intense grief or illness or, you know, divorce. It's a season where the old life just stops working. That kind of awakening isn't always soft. Sometimes it feels like you're losing everything. But many of us look back and see that some of those hardest seasons forced us to hear something deeper and trust ourselves. And our higher self is not only present during mystical experiences, okay? It is present in the practical moment. When you know that you need to sleep, instead of, you know, frantically cleaning house, when you know that you need to tell the truth about something, or when you know you need to stop chasing somebody or leave something alone, when you need to create, you won't just have this desire to go out and plant stuff in your yard. Listen to that voice. It's telling you to do that because you need to get grounded. Okay? These are the things and the ways that spirit or your higher self will use to contact you. And intuition is the main one. It's the main way that the higher self speaks. And intuition is, for me, a very specific feeling. It's subtle, but it's strong. It's a thought that comes out of nowhere, just like that thing that I explained with going to... I still didn't get it. Oh my gosh. Okay. You know, it's a feeling, but there's no like urgency. It's usually very calm. It's a yes that's calm, but it kind of has this weight to it, like it feels aligned. It's not usually dramatic. It's more like, hey, pay attention. You know, that's the difference for me. Fear, though, is loud. Fear rushes. Fear, wants a guarantee. It wants the whole map before you take even one step. And the higher self feels steadier. It might be firm and it might just, be pushing you to do something different, but it doesn't come in, like panicky, screaming. It feels more like, just take the next honest step. You don't need to figure your entire life out by dinner. So this is the part where discernment matters. Trusting yourself. Discernment is just trusting. Not, because not every feeling that you have is intuition. Sometimes it is anxiety. Sometimes it's an old wound coming up and, you're just trying to fix it. And sometimes it's your nervous system saying, this is really unfamiliar and I just, want to leave and go home. So learn the difference by watching yourself over time. What does fear feel like in your body? What's it feel like when you feel like you're in alignment? What does it all feel like? And that intuition gets clearer when your nervous system is more regulated. Plain and simple. There's nothing complicated about it. When we're calmer inside, the signal is cleaner. We can tell the difference between fear and fears telling us what to do and higher self quietly guiding us. I also want to briefly mention spirit guides because, spirit guides connects, but I don't want it to take over the whole episode because spirit guides deserve their own conversation. But I do want to say this. I don't believe that we come into, Earth school unsupported. Some people call their support angels. Everybody's got a guardian angel, right? You have access to the archangels. I all the time call on Archangel Raphael to assist in healing. I call on Jesus or Yeshua. I call on Mary Magdalene or Mother Mary. I call on multitude of my ancestors. Some people call it the Holy Spirit. Some people just say God. Some people call it the field. There's no way to, list all of the spirit guides or angels, but they exist in order to support the higher self. That help is available. And I do believe that if we are to access that specific help, those guides, those angels, that we have to ask. And the reason is because it's not because, help is being withheld. They don't want to help us. They want to see us suffer. It's not because of that. It is because we have free will, and free will matters. Consent matters. Invitation matters. You have to ask to open the door. It says, I am willing to be guided. I am willing to listen. And I want to be shown. I'm a willing participant, consciously. So, yeah. So I'm always a sucker for a metaphor. So let's talk about this. If Earth School is the game, right? God or source is the whole field in the game. The reality where everything is happening inside. And then the higher self is the head coach. It sees the larger strategy. It's running the show. It knows the season that you're in. It knows your strengths, your patterns, your lessons, the timing of everything, and then the next play that needs to be called. And then the human self is the quarterback on the field. Joe Burrow, you're the one with the body. You're the one holding the ball. You're the one making the decisions in real time while life is running at you, and everybody's yelling. Spirit guides are like the support staff and the coordinators. They help us with protection or timing or opportunities. They can assist with healing, like I said, or, helping us recognize our patterns and those strange little divine things, divine setups that make you say, okay, that was not random. And, intuition is the headset. That is how the plays come through. The higher self can call the play, and the guides can support, and God can hold the field, but the human self still has to run the play. And that is what gives us our sovereignty and keeps us empowered. We're supported, but we're not passive. We ask, we listen, we discern, and then we move. Okay, so real quick, I do want to say, like, just a little side note about religious conditioning. I want to touch on this briefly because I know that the phrase higher self can be uncomfortable for people, especially if you've been raised in certain, religious traditions. Some people hear God self or divine within and immediately feel that old alarm system kind of go off. It can sound like we don't need God or that we're replacing grace with self worship. And that is not what I mean. The identity of who we are in this life is not God. This body, this Sheila figure, this podcaster that's talking to you right now is not God. The wounded self, the wounded personality is not the whole of source intelligence. Your reactive human self that gets irritated in traffic and forgets where you put the keys is not the Almighty. So when I talk about the higher self, I'm talking about the part of us that remains connected to God, the part that remembers that we are a part of the whole damn thing that's rooted in love and truth and divine intelligence. It's like the wave, in the ocean. The wave is separate from the ocean, but it's also part of the whole ocean, right? That distinction matters.
Pardon the slight interruption. Again, I have to kick this gnat's ass.
This. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is like that episode of Breaking Bad where he tries to kill the fly the whole episode. I'm sorry. Anyway, the higher self doesn't pull me away from God or from the creator or from source intelligence. It helps me experience that connection to the all there is more intimately. It turns my faith from something outside of me into something alive within me. You can use whatever language feels true for you: higher self, soul, Holy Spirit, the Christ within, inner wisdom, God consciousness. The words are not the destination, okay? The connection is. That is all I wanted to say. I just wanted you to realize that if you've come from that kind of a background, talking about the higher self is simply the Holy Spirit within, okay? So just wanted to say that. And we need the higher self because the human mind has limits. I love the mind. The mind is useful. It can plan and organize and remember things, but it's not supposed to be our only compass, okay? Where the mind sees a problem, the higher self is saying, there's a pattern behind that problem. You probably should figure that out, or you're going to keep having the same problem. And our minds want certainty, We want to know. The higher self is just like, stay in alignment. Stay in your frequency. And alignment is when the human self and the higher self are moving in the same direction, in harmony. The mind, is responsible for protecting the identity, the ego, the story we tell ourselves about who we are. The higher self guides the unfolding identity. Without connection to our higher self, we tend to, live reactively. We chase, we hold on, we ain't letting go. We compare ourselves to other people. We perform, we repeat old patterns and say that it's just our personality. We live in survival mode. But when the higher self is leading, when it's kind of in control, life becomes more coherent. Not necessarily in every single moment, but more coherent in the sense that your inner world and your outer actions are working in tandem. Spirit is the direction, and coherence is the state you feel when you're living in that direction. We begin to feel like something is aligned, and when something isn't, we become less addicted to other people's approval. We start to trust our own opinion. We stop needing to answer everything all at once and learn to just kind of let things unfold. We learn to trust that next step. And this is also where the talk about frequency comes in. Remember that I said we're radios? Well, we are. We're broadcasting and receiving all day long. And the state of our nervous system matters because a regulated nervous system allows the channel on the radio to tune in for the frequency to be received. If you want to connect to the source of love and compassion and benevolence, allow yourself to tap into those emotions. And then you will broadcast that and that frequency, and it will activate the turning of the dial until you land right in the middle of that bandwidth. So our frequency shapes what we notice, what we choose, what we allow, what we create, and how we can receive. And alternately, when we are broadcasting fear and that kind of stuff, we find fear everywhere. And when we're broadcasting resentment, we find proof for resentment. So the whole point is your emotional state, your nervous system state is directly related to that channel being opened. Okay? So when we shift into love and creativity and curiosity, something just opens up. The field around us just changes because we change how we are interacting with it. Our frequency is our light signature. The higher self helps us by guiding us into that state of coherence, and it reminds us that joy and playfulness and creativity and love are not childish, distractions from life. They're literally part of how we align with life. So how do we connect with this higher self? And I want to make it practical. For me, connecting to the higher self feels a lot like prayer, but with more listening and less begging. I talk to it. I ask my higher self for help, for clarity. I ask to be led to the right place, the right people, the right opportunities. I open that channel and I ask to be shown what I'm not seeing. Help me freaking see it. And, something I ask very dramatically sometimes is, because I sometimes don't see the signs. So I'll say, please make it obvious. Push, pull, drag me. That's what I say all the time. Push, pull, or drag me to where I need to be. Help me to know what I need to know and put me in the right place at the right time. Hit me over the head with a brick if that's what it takes, because, sometimes that's how I am. And you know that. I'm talking to my higher self. But if you have a specific problem and you want to ask your higher self for guidance on what to do in that specific thing, I'll walk you through what I found to be an effective way to bring yourself into that higher state, where the key is opening to receive. Okay? This is where most of us get stuck, because we ask and then we immediately analyze. Our brains just start running. They just start running forward. They start weighing pros and cons. They start seeing scenarios play out, waiting for this loud voice from heaven. And what you need to know is the process. It's very simple. It's 6 things, okay? Ask, quiet, notice, discern, act, and that's it, okay? First thing you got to do is ask. Speak clearly and ask your higher self, God, your soul, your guides, or I don't know, life itself for help. Ask what you need to know. Ask for the next aligned step. Ask where you're being guided, okay? And then after you do that, be quiet. This can be meditation, it can be breath work, it can be prayer or walk in nature, sitting with your hand on your heart and just turning off the noise long enough to just quiet everything down. The goal is not a perfectly blank mind. The goal is space to listen. Okay? You're going to let the answer arrive in the way that it arrives. It might be a word. It might be a body sensation. It might be an image or a memory. a feeling of peace or a sense of no. You know, it could come while you're journaling. And then you're going to watch what's repeating. Okay, what themes keep repeating? What symbols are you seeing? What conversations keep leading to the same thing? Those little nudges. Synchronicity is not a command, it's an invitation to pay attention. So you have to notice it and then discern. Ask whether the guidance feels loving or steady. Discernment is figuring it out for yourself. It's let me weigh how I'm feeling in my body. It's not up here. Okay, stop trying to go here. It's here. It's in your body. It's that feeling of peace. It's that steady, grounded, clear alignment feeling. Ask yourself, is this expanding me or, activating me? Is it bringing me closer to truth in some way? Wholeness, like we talked about? And then after that, once you've kind of discerned what you think you're getting, then you act. You take one grounded step, not 20, no dramatic life explosion. One step. You're going to, send the email, you're going to apologize, you're going to create something, you're going to say no to something, you're going to stop forcing and start tending what feels alive. Okay, guidance becomes clearer when we become trustworthy with it. The higher self doesn't need us to understand the entire map before we move. It just gives us that one step at a time. And I know for people like me, that can be really irritating. I like a map. I want to know what the plan is. And that safety keeps getting triggered in me. But my higher self usually just gives me the next right step. And I'm learning to just go with that because it's really all we need. Okay? So I'm going to do this. I want to, before we close, I want to just give you a simple practice, not a complicated one. You don't have to sit perfectly still and, wait for some huge mystical message. This is just a quick and easy way to open the channel. Okay? So whenever you go to do this, you can follow this example. You'll take a breath. Take a deep breath just to kind of clear everything out. Blow it out. You're going to make sure that your feet are on the ground. And you're just going to kind of focus in and center. Maybe place a hand on your heart if that feels natural. And then you're going to say, I'm opening my channel to my higher self to help me clear out this fog and help me recognize the difference between fear and truth. Help me feel what the next aligned step is. Lead me to the right places, the right people, and the right opportunities. And then help me to recognize the signs. Help me to trust what is true and help me to act with courage, love, and clarity. And then you pause, and then you do that breath again, and then you don't force an answer. You have to be content with, I've opened the channel, and now today, I'm just going to wait for the breadcrumbs. It might be a dream tonight. It might be while I'm journaling. It might be a conversation. It might be on TV. It might be anything, okay? A feeling in your body, a repeated thought, okay? Or a sudden sense of clarity. So the practice is not to demand an answer, okay, or force your frequency. It's to become available through opening up your channel, through tuning your radio, to move through your day with a little bit more awareness, okay? You're going to notice what feels heavy, what feels alive, what is repeating, and, the things that bring peace, the things that keep gently pulling at your attention. And when something lands clearly, take one small step. That's it. Not the whole plan, not the whole staircase, just the step. Okay? Because the higher self usually doesn't overwhelm us. It's not going to give us the whole thing. It just wants one grounded action. And you just have to ask yourself, what is that? What's that action that I'm supposed to take? Okay, so that is the practice. Ask, quiet, listen, notice, discern, and act. Okay? So now here we are at the end of this discussion about the higher self. And I just want you to know the higher self isn't far away. It's not something that you have to earn. And it is certainly not something that is just reserved for mystic saints and psychics. Okay? People with better morning routines than us. It is the clearest part of our own consciousness. It is the soul level part, the God connected part, the part that remembers, that loving intelligence, the signal beneath the static. And, there's lots of ways that it's going to try and communicate with us. And it's our responsibility to foster that relationship with our higher self so that we learn its language. Okay, so as we come to the end of this episode this week, ask for help, ask for clarity, ask to be shown, ask your higher self, ask God, ask your guides, and then listen and pay attention to your body, pay attention to the repeated themes, and all of that stuff. Okay, we are moving in through some really intense energy right now, and knowing that we have this higher source intelligence right within us all the time is the way that we're going to get through it. We're not going to get through it by staying in our mind and trying to reason out what's happening. Okay, so thank you for being here with me today. It feels really good to be back in this space, back in the conversation and everything, the beautiful weirdness of Earth School Radio. If this episode spoke to you, share it with somebody, who's learning to trust their own inner guidance. And as always, until then, stay open, stay grounded, and keep your dial tuned to love. This is Earth School Radio. I love you guys. Have a wonderful week. And say hi to your higher selves for me. I'll see you next time. Peace, love, and happiness.